Hey guys, it's Miss Adelini. Today we're going to be talking about functional groups and the properties that they give molecules of which they're a part. So first we're going to take a look at molecules themselves and the bonds that exist within those molecules. Now, the electronegativities of two atoms that participate in a bond determine the type of bond that will form between them. There are three possible bonds that we're going to talk about today: ionic bonds, polar covalent bonds, and nonpolar covalent bonds. We're going to take a look at an example of a bond that exists in this molecule right here. We're going to take a look at the bond between carbon and nitrogen right here. So, first, we have to look at their electronegativities from this periodic table of the elements that includes electronegativity values. Well, electronegativity is the tightness with which a particular atom holds on to its electrons. Now, we can figure out the type of bond based on the electronegativity difference that exists between two atoms. So let's take a look at the carbon-nitrogen bond. It appears that carbon right here has an electronegativity value of 2.5, and nitrogen has an electronegativity value of 3.0. So if I wanted to find the difference between those electronegativity values, I'm going to take the larger one, nitrogen, which is 3.0, minus carbon's electronegativity value, which is 2.5. And I end up with an electronegativity difference of 0.5. Now I'm going to go down to this little chart, which tells me, based on the electronegativity difference, what bond type we're looking at. So we had 0.5, so it looks like it falls in the polar covalent bond range. That means within this bond, the electrons are not shared evenly between nitrogen and carbon, and the more electronegative atom, which in this case was nitrogen, is going to hold the electrons a little more tightly and get a partial negative charge, which leaves carbon with a partial positive charge. Okay, going back to our concept map, we've looked at examples of how electronegativity differences can give us our three different bond types. Ionic bonds would have the highest electronegativity difference. Polar covalent are in the middle. And with a nonpolar covalent bond, they would have little to no electronegativity difference, meaning the electrons would be shared pretty evenly between the two atoms. So when two atoms are connected by ionic bonds or polar covalent bonds, they end up with either full or partial charges. We have a few examples of functional groups, which are groups of atoms that occur within molecules commonly that are either charged or polar. So I'll take a look at this list down here. We've got three basic polar functional groups with slight charges on each atom but no overall charge. Our first one is OH, or a hydroxyl group. Our second is CO, C double bonded to O, which is a carbonyl group. And then the last one is SH, or sulfhydryl group. We also have three types of functional groups that end up being charged in real cells. COOH is one way to write a carboxyl group, but when it's in a real cell, it gives up that hydrogen and ends up being COO minus, a full charge. NH2 is an amino group, and that usually takes on an extra hydrogen and gains a positive charge. And our last one is PO4 2-, which is a phosphate group, and it has a full 2- charge. Out of our list of functional groups, groups of atoms that occur within molecules commonly, there's only one nonpolar functional group in which the atoms are held together with nonpolar covalent bonds, and that would be a methyl group. Methyl groups are usually written CH3, but it could be CH2 if that carbon is bonded to something else as well. As long as you see C's and H's, you can assume that that's nonpolar. Okay. So I want to take a look at an example of a problem that you might be asked to complete based on your knowledge of functional groups and their properties. So for each of these two molecules, we're going to determine whether they're polar or nonpolar based on the functional groups present. Now the first one that I see, right away I know that this is a sugar. Every place where I see a corner of this pentagon, there should be a carbon atom there. They don't draw them in, but we're going to assume that they're there. And it looks like we have a bunch of hydroxyl groups, OH, hanging off of that central carbon ring. We know that OH is one of our polar functional groups, and since there are so many of them on this small molecule, I'm going to assume that the molecule as a whole is polar. So this molecule is going to be attracted to any polar or hydrophilic molecule, and it's going to repel any nonpolar or hydrophobic molecule. Okay. Now down here, for problem number 2, we have this large molecule. I want you to take a look at the functional groups present within this molecule and decide whether you think this molecule is polar or nonpolar and why. Take a minute to do that, pause this video, and then when you come back to this video, I will tell you the correct answer and why. Okay, at this point you should have taken a look at this large molecule number 2 and determined whether it's polar or nonpolar based on the functional groups present. Now I do see carbon and oxygen. This was probably a carboxyl group at one point, and when it got linked to this glycerol molecule, we probably lost a hydrogen here. So a carboxyl group, or if we're just looking at the carbonyl, is polar, but I do see that a significant portion of these 3 chains right here are carbon and hydrogen atoms. And we know that methyl groups tend to be nonpolar because carbon and hydrogen share electrons pretty evenly. So because there's so many carbon and hydrogens, I would say that as a whole this molecule is nonpolar. And we do find that to be true because this is a fat. It's called a triglyceride because we've got 1 glycerol molecule shown in blue and 3 fatty acids shown in black. And it's nonpolar because it has mostly carbons and hydrogens, which we know to be nonpolar. Okay, thank you very much. I hope this was helpful.